Hello everybody, it's me Julie. I just thought I'd pop on and do a Q&A for my new podcast that just was released yesterday. So for those of you who aren't familiar, I released a podcast yesterday called the Secure Love Podcast Real-Time Couples Therapy with me, Julie Manano. So I'm taking a real couple, Melissa and Drew, through 20 sessions of couples therapy. So each episode will correspond to its own, each session with them will correspond to its own episode of the podcast. And I'm actually also going to be doing little bonus episodes once a week, maybe like 15 minutes of me just giving a little more commentary than I give in the actual podcast. So in the actual podcast, I'm doing this session, but then I've edited in commentary from me as we go in order to help you, the listeners, apply the information to your own relationship, to kind of say, hey, here's where I'm going with this, here's what I'm doing here, and here's why. And then at the end, I give everybody some homework. You can go to thesecurerelationship.com to download free PDFs and kind of do some work along with the podcast. So yeah, so I'm really loving it. I mean, this hands down is the most fulfilling thing professionally I've ever done before. So I'm just really nerding out on this and recognizing that I really believe this can make just such a huge difference in the lives of people, especially those who don't have access to their own couples therapy, just to kind of, hey, let me make this process as alive as possible for you, especially coming, viewing all of this through the lens of attachment theory, where most people really are stuck in these anxious, avoidant relationship dynamics. And even if you're not, everybody's got these negative cycles, and most people, underneath the surface of the negative cycles, whether, you'll see in the podcast, whether we're talking about hospitalizations or houseplants, underneath the surface is the same stuff, the same vulnerabilities that are being hidden, the same unmet attachment needs. So anyway, I'll be doing another bonus section each week where I speak more directly to those who are wanting to be more actively involved in the process, and people who are, marriage therapists, couples therapists, clinicians themselves who would like a little more insight into how I'm going about this. So anyway, popping on here to do a little Q&A about the podcast and see where it goes for those of you who are curious, have a little more curiosity about it. So I'm gonna, someone says, has the podcast started yet? Yes, it has been released. It's on all the platforms. I think the two most popular platforms are Spotify and Apple, but it's on Amazon, everywhere. And if you go to, someone says, is there a link? There is actually a link in my story. I believe there's 2 links right now up in my story to my website, which then you can go link to Spotify, Apple, Amazon from there. But if you just go to Spotify or Apple and put in the Secure Love Podcast, it'll pop up for you. Someone says, what is the homework like? Well, it's a great question. So in episode 1, what I'm trying to do with Melissa and Drew is just start to get a clear picture of what their negative cycle looks like. And that is where we start with this type of work. We start with negative cycles. Like, what does the pattern look like? What do you say? What do you say? What's going on? When you say this, he does this. When he does this, you say that. Or so, underneath, we're kind of fueling these negative cycles is feelings, right? And in the first session, what I really addressed in this first session with Melissa and Drew is I really wanted to first address their anger, and especially Melissa's anger, because as the anxious partner, anxious partners are usually holding on to a little more anger. I wouldn't say they're holding on to more anger. As this work plays out, you'll see that they're both holding on really to the same amount of anger. It's just the anxious partner ends up having to express it all for both, and that we want to balance that out. But imagine if you take a can of beans or something, right? Like a tin can of beans, and you have all of this stuff inside, the softer stuff inside, but the first, before you can get to that softer stuff, you've got to open up the can. And to open up the can, you've got to have some sort of, get the can opener and really kind of pop that off. And that's what I'm doing in this first episode with the anger, is I'm really just trying to like start lifting the lid of the anger, moving the anger out of the way. The way that you move anger out of the way is you make space for it. You have to spend a little bit of time with it. You don't get just straight into the can of beans. You have to get through that anger first. And, hearing anger, making space for anger. And when I say anger, I mean healthy anger. Anger is, first of all, always healthy, but it's the way that people express anger that makes the difference between healthy and unhealthy. And so what I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, let's make some space for this real anger and frustration that you both are dealing with here. Let's understand more about it. Anger and frustration exists for very good reasons. I need to understand those very good reasons and figure out what the anger and frustration is trying to do, what kind of change is it trying to motivate, so that I have a better idea of how I can help them and you as the listeners get these needs met that the anger is trying to get met in a new way that's actually healthier. And a lot of that starts with just putting words to it. So that's where I'm going with them. There's a ton of vulnerability. I mean, you probably could define the work I do by working with vulnerability, but I got to start with getting underneath that anger. To get underneath that anger, we got to hold it, validate it, hear it, understand it, help share it in healthy ways, instead of it just not coming out at all and then coming out sideways or coming out reactively or stuffing it down and all these, terrible things that people do that get their relationship stuck. So that's number one. So to go full circle with the homework assignment is intended to help you map out your negative cycle with your partner. So I've asked some targeted questions. What happens, think of a moment when your partner did something that left you feeling unheard or annoyed or misunderstood or whatever it is. And then, what came up in you? What did you do? And then, your partner will do their side of the equation too. And then you can kind of understand how in these patterns where you guys get stuck in fights or arguments or what I call negative cycles, like how it's playing out. So we're just trying to open up space for seeing it a little more clearly, organizing yourselves, organizing your relationship interactions so that we can slowly start to do new things. And yeah, so that's what the homework is meant to do. And the book can be a big support in this process too. I mean, really, I did this podcast to bring to life the process I put out in the book, Secure Love. So I say in one part, Secure Love, the book, is like the prescription instruction manual, and Secure Love, the podcast, is like the movie version of the book. So anyway, you don't have to get the book to follow along, but it actually, obviously can be a real help. So if you don't want to do the book and the PDF is there. It's on the website. Like I said, it's free. So let me go back here. I'm going to try to find questions that are related to the podcast. So someone says, how do you dissect a situation when a man doesn't talk about feelings much? Well, that man is Drew in the podcast. Drew has never learned how to talk about feelings. He's never had success talking about feelings. And there's a lot of really good reasons for that. So again, I'm going to go in there and figure this out. What happened? What are the blocks here? Drew, and he's, definitely has an avoidant attachment style. And you'll see, I'm really, just in the first episode alone, I mean, it takes a bit. I have to kind of stay with him. But by the end of the podcast, he is talking about his feelings instead of, just saying, instead of just showing Melissa sort of shutting down or pulling away when he gets overwhelmed inside, he's able to say, I start to feel really helpless. I start to feel like in these moments when we're in this cycle and this distress and I can't reach you and I can't make it better, my body just starts to feel really heavy and helpless. And I don't know what to do in those places. I'm going to teach him what to do in those places. But right now, I'm just helping him put words to those places. So I think if you watch me do it with Drew, that's probably going to give you a better answer than me trying to explain it right here. Oh, great question. What are you most excited to cover in the podcast? I'm most excited. I don't know if this is an answer to your question, but I'm going to do my best here. I'm most excited for people to see that this process actually works. I've got this couple. They are in an anxious avoidant dynamic. They have 3 children, a 6-year-old and twin toddlers. They, like I said, their negative cycles might be about houseplants one day and something really big and serious the next day. They've got all this unresolved baggage and wounds they're carrying around. They have normal life stressors that they have to deal with every day. And they fight, they yell at each other. I mean, these are, they're not the most escalated couple out there. They're not getting violent with each other, but they're certainly getting really escalated at home. And you're going to see them come into this environment where I create this safety and help them start being safe with each other, right? I'm teaching them really ultimately more than anything, how to be safe with each other, how to be a comforting presence to each other, even when all this terrible stuff is going on. And it's that safety that starts to create the shifts in their relationship more than anything. I mean, I'm going to give them skills. I'm going to help them put words to things. I'm going to give, I've got a whole toolbox of communication skills, but those communication skills do not really work unless we really get the felt sense of emotional safety on board in the relationship. When couples start trying to put communication tools and new ways of saying things into practice without that felt sense of emotional safety on board, it sometimes it can actually make things worse because their heart is not in a safe place when they're delivering these messages. So I'm doing both. I'm giving the skills, I'm making the safety, I'm giving the skills, and I'm really excited to see, hey, people, this work actually really works, right? Yeah, there are going to be plenty of people out there listening who this isn't going to be enough to transform their relationship, but it's certainly going to help them understand it better. And some people are going to need more help than what I can offer in this, but there are going to be a lot of people who are really going to heal because of going through this process. So that's what I'm most excited about. I think that, I love, the process I do probably 90% of the time that I put into the work I do, as much as I do on social media and Instagram. And it's very important to me to keep up with that and be putting out this information for free for people who just don't have access. But 75 to 90% of my time is spent working with couples and becoming a better clinician. It's, I probably spend the same amount of time studying and getting better at what I do as I do working with clients. And so for me, just being able to put this process out there in the way I do it, it's just super fulfilling. I feel like, going into, as you see the process unfold and we start with this anger and then we start getting down into these deeper layers of sadness and aloneness and powerlessness and helplessness and, all these rich human experiences that everybody feels in their relationships sometimes, and help them putting words to that. And then moving into, how a lot of this is kind of flavored by these self-beliefs, these negative self-beliefs that we come to the table with in our relationships that we usually picked up in childhood and along the way in other adult relationships. And, just seeing how those beliefs come into the mix and they kind of mix up with all the vulnerability and the hurts from the relationship in the present day. And let's start unwinding that. Let's start detangling those beliefs. Let's start helping you guys, Melissa and Drew, help each other in these places instead of, I've got to go self-regulate before I can show up. And let's help you get down to the heart of the matter when you start to go in these negative cycles so you can co-regulate. Self-regulation is great. It's necessary. I love it. Can't get anywhere without it. But what about co-regulation? Let's get that on the table. That feels better. Co-regulation is 20 times more effective at regulating one's nervous system than self-regulation. Not throwing self-regulation under the bus. It's absolutely necessary. We can't co-regulate with 2 people who don't already have some self-regulation skills. But so, and then, once we get kind of deeper into the self-beliefs and we start kind of going into these childhood wounds and bringing all that out. And, I I'm never going diving right into that stuff at the beginning. I have to build an alliance. I have to build a relationship and help them feel safe with me, first of all, and just kind of titrate into all that. Doing the body work and really getting them down into like finding these emotions in their body. I think maybe that would be my favorite thing about doing this podcast is just really helping that process come alive. I mean, how many of you grew up in environments where you had no idea that emotions reside in your body? Well, they do. And I'm going to help you see that. And it's going to come alive with two people who've never experienced emotions in their body and put words to that in their entire life. And then as we kind of get those emotional wounds out, then we start diving more deeply into these old wounds that they have created between the two of them. Old abandonments, old feeling dropped, old anything that has happened between the two of them that is still really alive and blocking their ability to fully trust each other. You know, I never ignore wounds at the beginning of the work. I mean, we can talk about them all day long, but we're only going to talk about them to the point where they start becoming a negative cycle. And then we're like, okay, well, we're going to process this negative cycle and figure out what's going wrong with this conversation about these old wounds. Because if I let you talk about old wounds in a negative cycle, you're going to make the wounds worse. So let's kind of back away and let's figure out, you know, what you're hearing when she brings up this old topic. And I'm going to help them speak about, you know, later in the therapy about these wounds outside of this cycle so that they can heal, so they can start healing. And so anyway, that's a really long-winded answer to your very short question, which was, what are you most excited about? But I think that the answer is like everything. All right, so let's see here if we go back down. In my experience, women are more the talkers making attempts at communication and men are not communicators. Where are the male communicators? Yeah, I mean, let's balance this out, right? Yeah, that is true that women in a lot of relationships, probably 75% tend to be more of the communicators than men, but women also tend to be more of the unhealthy communicators, while men are the unhealthy non-communicators. So I'm always working to what we call engage the withdrawer, engage the non-communicator, get them online, get them into their feelings so they can show up and communicate more. And I'm helping to soften the anxious partner, soften the pursuer. Since 75% of pursuer anxious partners are female and 75% of withdrawing avoidant partners are male, that typically looks like softening the female, engaging the male. Now, 75% is not 100%. There's still 25% of, you know, pursuing anxious partners who are male. That's not a small number, right? So I don't want to dismiss or invalidate those of you who don't fall into those gender norms. And there's obviously, you know, not all couples are heteronormative. So we have to take that into account too. But if we just look at statistics, you know, most anxious pursuers are female, most withdrawing avoidant partners are male. And so again, my job is to soften the anxious partner and engage the avoidant partner. And neither, honestly, I've worked with hundreds of couples, maybe even, I don't know, maybe 1,000 couples or more. And I have yet to come across any reason to say that female communicators are any healthier when they first come to me than their male non-communicating counterparts. So people are just really giving me a lot of gratitude, and I just really appreciate that. It's everything to me. Does it stick? It sticks. Yeah. I mean, the work I do is absolutely meant to heal people's relationships in a way that they can help each other heal their childhood wounds. Notice I'm saying help, not do all the work for them. Some of our work is individual work that we alone have to do, or maybe go get some individual therapy for that. But wouldn't it be nice if couples learned to support each other through that healing process and actually helped emotionally support each other in ways that does start to reverse those childhood wounds, right? The childhood wounds are created by an emotionally toxic environment. So guess what? Emotionally healthy environments can heal those childhood wounds. So yes, the work does stick if it is practiced properly and consistently. And both partners are working together to make that happen. And that doesn't mean both partners are working together from the get-go. Sometimes one partner really does more work at the beginning to get this ball rolling and to start creating safety, and the other partner starts to come on board later. Does it always work that way? No. Unfortunately, there's no relationship advice out there that is guaranteed to make a relationship work. That's just a reality. What I'm here to do is dramatically increase the odds, and I believe that the work I do does dramatically increase the odds. Some people are not ready for help. Some people are, have different agendas as far as what helps looks like, and some people, there's many reasons, right, that people aren't able to participate in relationship improvement. But that doesn't mean that if they aren't at the beginning, they just should, that there's no hope, because there is still a lot of hope. Just one person creating some safety can change the whole system and make it more likely that the other people in the system, including children and anybody else that's, in the core of that system, will start to shift too. My whole life has been predicated by that belief. My personal life, my professional life, I've seen it work too many times to not believe that is 100% true. But we have to balance that out with the other part of this, that adults have complicated issues inside of them, and not everybody is ready to change with the partner. Where on your website is the homework, or do I misunderstand about the homework? No, it is there. I don't know exactly. There's a tab or a link. So maybe Katrina, my assistant who's on with me right now, can say where on the website you can access the PDF homework. Negative cycles can begin with such a tiny seed. How are you able to identify that seed early? The seed is going to be you're going to feel the seed in your body. If you're asking me, how do you identify it in your own relationship early, and not asking me how I identify it with a client, which I think you're asking the former, not the latter. So I'm going to go with that. Anytime you're in a relationship interaction, even if it's someone, you're really relatively casual with, if you feel anything coming up in your body, that's a discomfort, a tension, somehow you feel kind of misunderstood, or you feel anything that happens that you then kind of react to in a way that might sort of trigger the other person, that's a cycle, right? It's when you're getting a bad feeling, reacting to it in a way that maybe isn't super healthy, or even is super healthy, but the other person still gets triggered, and then they get the bad feeling in their body, and then they react, and now you're kind of bouncing off of each other. So if you have any sense in your body that something feels off, that's a really good moment to tap into that and try to hear it, try to listen to what it's trying to say. Because if you don't listen to that uncomfortable feeling and honor it and try to hear it and try to kind of go, all right, I think what this feeling is saying is that I feel kind of, invalidated right now about what I just shared with this person I'm dating. And what do I need to do here? What's the course of action here? Do I need to check in and say, hey, this is kind of one of those, I feel like what would feel better for me here is if you could just sort of hear what I'm saying, or I don't know, however that looks. I mean, it could look like, I feel kind of emotionally validated. Can we work on that? Or, you might even check in what's happening with you, because it seems like something I said didn't land well with you. Anyway, you're listening to that tension in your body that we're going to call emotional invalidation, and you're figuring out something else new to do with it, instead of just going into a reactive place where you shut down, or you protest, or you argue back with them, or you decide to break up with them, or whatever. So anyway, that's where you're going to find the negative cycles in the triggers, basically. And if you're, handling those triggers in a way that is healthy communication, and your partner is able to join you in that, and they feel safe and they're able to respond to your healthy communication with their own healthy communication, that's a positive cycle. I'm reading your book with my boyfriend. How do I know if I'm extremely anxious or disorganized? Do you talk about how you know in the podcast? No, I don't. I don't talk about how you know that in the podcast. That's not something I'm going to directly be addressing there. But I think that, that's a good question. I always say, it's like, what is the difference between a rain and a storm, right? There's some point at which just kind of regular everyday rain becomes a big storm. It's really hard to pinpoint that place. So I think what it is if you want to just check in and say, well, how uncomfortable am I? Like, am I extremely uncomfortable most of the time? That's going to lean more into that disorganized category. If you're anxious attachment, you feel uncomfortable, but a lot of times you don't feel uncomfortable. You do have the ability to feel safe a lot of the time. And your feelings of anxiety around the relationship either aren't to the point that they get really intolerable, or you're not just acting out on them in these big ways. Then you're probably more over on that anxious side of the spectrum. Either way, your work is to work with your triggers. Your work is to work with what's going on when you get triggered. What are the fears around that? What are the deeper feelings around that? What are the self-beliefs around that? What are you now doing in your relationship to manage those triggers? And is that working for you? And if it's not, it really doesn't matter if you're anxious or disorganized or avoidant. You need to work on what you're doing with your triggers and start doing new things with that. That's the work here. Knowing your attachment style can be very, very helpful because it helps inform you about why you feel the way you do, why you carry the fears the way you do, what are some really common behavioral traps. And it can be really helpful to help you heal, but you can still heal just by simply knowing, hey, I have an insecure attachment style. That means I'm carrying around a lot of relationship fears that are probably in large part related to the past and not just the present that I need to kind of look at. And I'm not reacting to those. I had a phone call come in a very healthy way. And if you know that, you work on what's not working. Okay, I don't see any more podcast questions, so can everybody hear me okay? Can you hear me? I hope you guys can hear me. Someone says they can't hear. Okay, good, you can hear me. Tips on how to feel emotions in your body. Yeah, so, think of a moment when your partner said or did something that you really didn't like. I'm just going to do this really fast. Just imagine in your mind, like, what they said, what they did, the look on their face, whatever it was that, really didn't hit you well, took you to a bad place. And now just kind of feel in your body what comes up when you imagine that moment when, they said this mean thing or whatever. And now, try to see if you can locate that feeling in your body. Is it a tension? Is it a tightening? Is it a stomach sensation? Is it a pressure in your head? And just kind of linger with that and try not to run away from it into your head or, just try to kind of stick with that, kind of hone in on that feeling in your body and linger with it for a couple minutes maybe. And as you linger with it, start to, you might start to kind of figure out how to put a word to it. Is it a afraid feeling? Is it a anxious feeling? Is it a kind of starting to turn into a numb feeling? And, try to see if you can put a feeling word to that tension or that pressure, wherever it is in your body. And then you really want to think, well, afraid, if it's a fear feeling, if it's an anxious feeling, what am I afraid of? What am I anxious about? It's not random. Your body is fearing something that they said triggered this fearful place. Is it, I'm afraid that if they're talking to me like this now, this is never going to end and I'm always going to feel talked down to? Or am I afraid that I'm not enough for them right now? It could be multiple fears. Just grab onto one of them. If you really sit with that fear, it's probably going to start transforming into sadness, right? What would it be like to always feel disrespected by my partner? That would be a pretty sad, awful place to go, right? So now you're starting to hopefully feel that all of this stuff really is happening in your body. And, the starting point is always what your body is trying to tell you. All right, well, I don't see any more. Someone says, I've read 4 books, including Secure Love, and watched over 400 videos on this, yet I still don't feel like I can reach my avoidant ex. I tried reaching with new communication techniques, still being rejected. Well, I don't know if you mean emotionally. I'm assuming you mean you can't emotionally reach him, or are you trying, since he's an ex, if you're trying to restart the relationship up. But the problem is some people just aren't able to do this on their own. Some people need extra help. If you've done everything on your part, if you've read the books, if you're showing up in the best, most perfect way possible that you could, then, you might be dealing with someone who isn't able to meet you where you want to be right now. And you might have to maybe accept that and start going through the grieving process, grieving the loss of what you were hoping for. The loss and the acceptance that, I have some power here. I can do everything on my part to make this work, but there's still another person involved, and they really have to be willing to. And if nothing I'm doing is able to reach them, then it might be time to move on. And there's another piece to that maybe it's time for professional help. Now, since, if self-help isn't working, that's when I would say, hey, let's try some professional help. But you're saying this person is your ex, so I'm not 100% sure if they're open to that, but that's what I would say would be the next step. And I'm really sorry that you're going through that. Is the podcast solo, or are there guests discussing with you? It is going to be for the most part solo, but my mentor, George Faller, who I have learned everything I know from, we're working together on this in the background, and he's going to be definitely in these bonus episodes I'm going to be doing. We're going to be hearing some from him popping in and helping kind of explain some things or talk about the direction we're going to go in the following week. So he will be coming in here and there, but for the most part, it's just going to be me, Melissa, and Drew. What is your process in helping avoidant feel safe to open up? There's a lot of tools I have for that, but I would say probably the first tool is validating why they don't open up to begin with. They need to feel heard and understood and supported in that. We need to honor their defenses, which is, you didn't learn to open up. It hasn't been safe to open up. You might try to open up, but then your partner kind of quickly says, well, I'm suffering too. Or, you'll see that happen in the podcast. Or your partner, whatever, their response isn't the healthiest. And so then that makes you close down. Not that that's working. We need to work through that block so both of you can work together. But that's also a really good reason why your body has learned to not open up. Tell me about why it's been safe for you to not open up. And as you kind of honor that in someone and not say, hey, you're bad, you're wrong, you're broken or whatever, people, that encourages them to start self-reflecting and coming out on their own. And then when they're, when you kind of work with those defenses and you, create this safety, then you just start slowly making opportunities for them to open up. And then when they do start moving toward that and they start taking these steps toward vulnerability, you help them see what the success is in that. Like, look, this is a more successful strategy. This actually helps you stay safer than shutting down. And then on the other side of the equation, I'm always working with the partner too, and I'm helping the partner show up in a safe way for their partner's vulnerability. I'm helping them now help their partner be successful. So I'm working with both of them. One, I'm helping you kind of do it, and the other one, I'm helping you support it. What do you do with the embodied sadness? You listen to it. Does it need to grieve? Does it need to be shared? Does it need to just have comfort? What is that sadness needing? Sadness, when it gets space, the idea is that it will process through on its own, and in most cases it will. Some people are going to have more of an overwhelming experience with sadness than others, and they might need to get some professional help if they don't have people in their lives that can help support them through that. Or, some people, if they get overwhelmed with grief, they might, again, get professional help to help them kind of titrate through that grief so it doesn't have to consume their whole lives. The way grief works is that, if you're grieving some sort of loss, especially a big loss that had a significant attachment bond to it, the grief is going to be really big and powerful at first. And so if you're just now kind of getting down into that sadness over something in your life, that you haven't spent time with that sadness before, it is going to come out. It needs space. And at first they might need a lot of space. And unfortunately, that's just, there's only two options with grief. One is we go through it, or two, we shove it away, and then it sort of stays alive in us. So anyway, that's what kind of needs to happen with that is once you get into it, you need to make space for it, let it be, cry it out, let that energy flow through your body. And, that doesn't mean that you are, in the middle of work, you start to get a crying spell and you have to follow that crying spell. You might need to put it away as best as you can, get through the day, focus on what you need to do, and then make sure that you're making space for that grief to come alive in other times. And, it's not about it, kind of succumbing to our feelings all the time. A lot of it's about timing. We need to be giving the space to these feelings, but that doesn't mean that we need to be giving them the space to them right then and there when we might have other really important things that we need to focus on. A lot of times this is where couples get stuck, is that, they need to address concerns with each other, but the timing is really off. And so I'm always working with timing. Like, yeah, this problem needs to be addressed. We need to not ignore it, but there's also a timing issue here. When your partner brings up their concern, that's not when it's time to bring up your concern. That's a bad timing. Your concern will bring up later. Right now, your partner has the mic because they initiated something first. So we need to really stay with that and hold that. Someone says, I'm not sure if you mentioned it, how often will you be posting your podcast? Once a week will be the sessions with Melissa and Drew. And then my little bonus episodes, I don't know yet. My idea, doing it my way would be every week I have a little 15-minute bonus episode. But unfortunately, I have other people telling me what to do, which is, thank God I have advisors, because this train goes off the rails without advisors. But so we'll see what my producer and my assistant Katrina have to say about that. Oh my gosh, Lauren, hi. It's so good to see you. Wow. Well, I'm really happy that I was able to help you. Wow, choked me up a bit. So you validate even though you don't think they're right. Well, you validate feelings, not behaviors or thoughts. Feelings are always valid. You might not think that they're right and what they said or did or whatever. You can say, hey, that was really crappy behavior. That really wounded me. That's terrible. Like, that can't happen again. But at the same time, I understand there was some anger around that. And that was your way of trying to manage that anger, was to throw a plate at the wall and break it. That was really scary for me. That's not okay. And I want to honor that anger, and I want to make space for that. But we have to figure out how to do that in a different way, because throwing things is just not going to work for me. Hello, love the first episode of the podcast. Is there an option available to sign up to be the next couple? No, but there will be in the future, because I'm definitely going to be doing it again. And yes, so I will, so definitely pay attention, because that will be coming up. Someone loved the first episode again. Thank you so much. Are you open to collect topics from your audience? Well, the topics come from the couple. So whatever they bring to me is what we're going to process. They might bring to me several different things, and I've got to kind of use my intuition as a clinician to go with whatever, feels most alive or whatever feels most important to them. I mean, a therapeutic relationship is, I'm the leader for sure. Thank God for that, because they need my help with this. That's what I'm trained to do. If I needed help learning how to be a better IT person, I would be going to Drew for help, because that's what he does. But anyway, I'm the leader, but I'm working collaboratively with them. So if something's really big for them, yes, we're going to address it. I'm not going to ignore that. But a lot of times, every time, no matter what. Okay, I'm back, everyone. I think it cut off because I had a call come through. But what I was saying is how do I pick the topics? Well, the topics come alive in the session. And the topics, it doesn't matter what we start talking about. It's always going to go into the same themes of feeling unsupported, feeling unheard, feeling unappreciated, feeling like there's no space for my feelings, feeling like I can't reach you, feeling like no matter what I do, I feel like I'm kind of getting labeled as getting it wrong, feeling like, it's always going to go down into those attachment themes. So it really, the surface is just kind of like the can of beans. It's just the metal top, right? Once we get that open, we're going to get right down into the heart of the business. And then, what a lot of what I do is called present process. That means that in the third session that I just recorded, this happened where I see, where Melissa and Drew are talking about their successes. And I say, because third session in, they're saying, hey, we're noticing a huge difference. We're having fewer negative cycles, and they're less intense, and we're repairing faster. So 3 sessions in, they're starting to improve. That's amazing. But then Melissa says, I say, well, let's work on what kind of didn't work. Like, help me understand a moment when like you did get stuck in that cycle. And so she looks at Drew and she says, well, I just first want to say you're doing such a great job, and I'm so proud. And she goes into this dialogue about how great he's doing. And so bam, there's the negative cycle right there. Yes, she is, praising him and rewarding him and appreciate him. And that's beautiful. And there's nothing wrong with that. But a lot of that is more than just that. It's coming from her anxiety, her need to kind of front load and make sure he's okay, and that it's okay for her to talk about a problem so he doesn't get triggered. And that's the cycle, is her trying to kind of manage her own anxiety around triggering him by protecting him from the trigger so that she doesn't lose the closeness. And she even says, she's like, look, we've worked so hard for this closeness. We're doing well. I don't want to sit here and ruin it by bringing something up. So she goes into her people pleasing, and it's exhausting for her. I don't want her to have to live like that. I don't want her to have to, every time she brings up something that's not working for her, to have to go to all these lengths to get him settled. And it doesn't, and to be honest with you, he does it too. She's not innocent in this. She has a role to play in that problem. One is sometimes the way she delivers messages, and other roles that we'll see in the sessions. But it also, Drew gets the message from her that she has to walk on eggshells, and then he feels like he has to walk on eggshells, and so it's all this cycle. So how did I get to that? Well, it shows up in their home and their week all the time. How did I get to that in the session? I watched it come alive in the session. That's called present process, where you find what's coming up alive. And it's really great to work with what's happening in front of you, because that is when the emotion's alive. And it's much better to work. It's much easier. It's much more efficient. It's much more useful to work with live emotions. Most couples therapy does not work with live emotions. So when you're not working with live emotions, you're just working with concepts. That's why I think that a lot of couples therapy isn't super successful, because the therapist hasn't been trained to work with live emotions. So, so if I say I have one, if I kind of narrow down the topic that I work with in every session, it's emotions, which is why this is called emotionally focused therapy for couples. So, all right, well, I'll go ahead and hop off here, but, someone says, are you still working with the couple? Yes, I am still working with the couple. We are 4 sessions in right now and 16 to go, although they're moving so quickly. Sometimes I wonder if we'll even need all of those 20 sessions. We'll see. Sometimes things surprise me, and it does, end up being more complicated and take a little bit longer, but they are really moving quickly. So, All right. Well, I'm going to hop off here. Sorry, does developing a secure attachment involve having a masculine lead and feminine follower? I mean, if that's what you want in your relationship, I'm a supporter of people structuring their relationship however they want, as long as attachment needs are being met. If I don't know what that means to you, I have an idea of what it means to have a masculine lead and a feminine follower, but I think you could ask 100 people that, like that concept or don't like that concept, what that means, and they'd probably give you different answers. So if I were working with you, I would say, what does this mean to you? How did you come to this idea? Like, what does that look like for you? What are you going for here? And then I would just make sure that, the attachment needs are being met and everybody's, both of you are on the same page and able to reach each other with that. So, I mean, that really goes for any way that anybody wants to structure their relationship, whatever works. I don't think that I encourage people, like specifically say, okay, the relationship can only be healthy if there's a masculine lead and a feminine follower, or a feminine lead and a masculine follower. That's not really my place. I'm just trying to create healthy communication, problem solving, emotional bonding. I keep saying I'm going to hop off, and then I keep looking at okay, someone I promise I'm really actually leaving. I'm sure most of you are tired of listening to me at this point, but how do you know when to be patient and fight for the relationship versus knowing when it's time to let go? 3 things I like to say. First of all, let me put this out there. Every situation is different. So this is global. This is generalized information. 1, have you done everything on your side of the street? Do you really believe that you have done to the capacity that you can, worked with your own limitations, created as much safety in the relationship as possible, really worked on your communication, your side of the street, and you really believe in your heart that you've given it practice, you've given it consistency, and you've given it time? I don't know if that's weeks. I don't know if that's months. I mean, I would say minimum of weeks, right? Everybody's different. Maybe for some people that's years of being, doing their best to be their best self, which is never a perfect process. But, and do you still, even in spite of all of your efforts, do you still feel like the relationship isn't where you want it to be? You're not fulfilled. You're not feeling close. The fighting is too bad. The conflict is too bad. You feel too anxious all the time. You don't feel safe enough of the time. And if that's the case, do you have any hope? Do you have any evidence of hope that it will ever be different? That means, is your partner working on themselves? Is anything happening that is giving you hope that, yeah, we can keep growing and get out of this eventually? Or is it happening fast enough for you? Some people, it's like such a snail's pace. They don't want to do another 5 years of suffering. So if you have done your side, you really truly have, you still don't feel like it's there, and you're really losing hope. Even if it's losing hope in yourself, even if it's like, look, I have so much resentment build up. I don't have a lot of hope that I can be my best self with this person. It's too much has happened. That's the point at which you start, what I say, not decide to leave or stay, but you start truly questioning what you want your future to look like. All right. Well, I'm going to be done here. Couple things. 1, the Secure Love podcast, real-time couples therapy with Julie Monato. You can find it anywhere podcasts are, Spotify, Apple, Amazon. I think they're the 3 biggest. You can go to thesecurerelationship.com, where you will find links to the Spotify or to the major platforms for the podcast. You can also download PDFs for homework for the podcast that you can use to work with your partner along with the podcast. Of course, my book, Secure Love, ties right into the podcast. That makes it even more explicit, the work I'm doing. And then if you want, I'm doing a workshop, by the way. Thursday evening, I'm doing an avoidant attachment workshop. If some of you have asked questions about how to get your avoidant to engage or how to find feelings in your body, that workshop is going to address all of that. So that's a 3-hour workshop. I don't remember the time, but it's on my website if you go to workshops on thesecurerelationship.com. So anyway, I do plan to put out a bonus episode for the podcast. I want to make a little, like some kind of like Facebook group or something for people who are just really into the podcast and, you know, want me to pop in and out and ask me more detailed questions about what's going on and how you can apply this to your life. I want to be so overwhelmingly supportive with this podcast. That's my heart is in as much support as possible for the people who are really into this experience and using it to help themselves as individuals and in their relationship. So, all right, everybody. Well, I'm going to pop off here, and it's been great. I cannot even believe that this has been 51 minutes. I feel like it's been like 15 minutes. So, all right. Well, thank you all for coming, and we'll catch up soon. Okay. Bye-bye.